What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. Last time Robbie's car had me really stumped and frustrated, so much to the point that I had to walk away and really scratch my head for a moment while I tried to figure out anything else that could possibly be giving us the issues that his car is having. It's been a few days. I've calmed down a lot, and I have come up with some more stuff that we can go over on this engine to hopefully get down to the bottom of this. Now, before I really start diving into what we're going to be doing, give you guys a quick update on what's going on with it and where exactly we're at with this thing. Alright, so it started out, the car was running and driving just fine, but the very moment that VTEC tried to engage, it was acting as though we were having some kind of ignition cut problem, and it was spazzing out sporadically, but only when VTEC was trying to engage. So assuming there was an issue with VTEC, we came out here and we tested our solenoid, found nothing wrong with the solenoid, unplugged it, went to test run the car to make sure that that there wasn't a fault going on within the circuit, and lo and behold, all hell had broke loose, and whatever's going on with this car had progressed into something worse, to the point where it was no longer going to move here from the spot where it's parked at. So you guys seen in the last video how it was running. Really led us to believe that one of two things: that we had a short in our wiring somewhere, or that possibly the new distributor here was faulty. So we pulled the distributor out, threw the one in from my wagon to make sure that the distributor itself wasn't causing our issues. That changed absolutely nothing by throwing the one in the wagon in here. And so with how it was acting, thinking at that point we've got an electrical short somewhere within his wire tuck harness, that we needed to pull that harness out and really open it up and take a look inside and see if we could find any problems. And so we pulled the harness, Robbie opened it up, he did find some questionable things in there and he got those fixed. I found something questionable going on with possibly one of his main engine plugs to the body, and I wired up a new plug to take care of that. We got the harness back in the car, and the problem still persisted. We're still at square one, and really there's only a few more things left that we can do to try to eliminate what's going on here. Now the motor fires up and it runs, so we know that we have spark, we know we've got air, and we know that we're getting fuel. So we need to really boil things down into the basics, since we know that we don't have an electrical short going on anywhere, we don't have a faulty distributor, and all the things that I had just mentioned right there. We're going to, before running any real tests, like a vacuum test and fuel pressure test and stuff like that, and even though I don't think that this is going to be our problem, we need to double check anyways. We just got to go over the whole checklist, make sure that we knock everything out and make sure that that's not what's going on here. I'm going to get my timing belt all lined up and make sure that our mechanical timing hasn't, for whatever reason, jumped a tooth or something and causing our problems to where it would still fire up, but start acting funny. And my belt is still nice and tight. I'm lined up at top dead center down below on the crank. Up here at the top with our cams, right over here, we're still lined up at top dead center. So we know our mechanical timing is okay. And since our timing is okay and everything else that we discussed, next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to be performing a engine vacuum test. So before we pull out the vacuum gauge and get it hooked up, we just want to visually check over everything that we can to make sure that we don't have any kind of a throttle body or an intake vacuum leak going on here, because any kind of vacuum leak can throw off anything that the computer is saying and could also possibly give us issues. So we'll check over, I would check over all of the vacuum lines, all the vacuum ports, make sure none of those vacuum lines are damaged or anything at all. Make sure you double check everything on your throttle body. because Robbie was out here the other day and looking over everything, and he said that he found that his throttle body idle screw had worked its way loose and was pretty much just like about ready to fall out. So he's got that tightened up back in there, and now that he's got that tightened up back in there, knowing we had some kind of a throttle body vacuum leak, it's now time for us to hook up the vacuum gauge and fire up his engine and see if anything has changed and see what the vacuum gauge tells us. So on a proper running healthy engine, we're going to want to see our vacuum here within our green range. And when we give it throttle, upon throttling it, you're going to see the needle jump all the way down. Then it should end up holding into the green range. And then when you release the throttle upon choking, the vacuum will jump up a little bit, but then should return steady back into the green range, just like so. We got our vacuum gauge here, and what we've done is we have found any of our unused vacuum nipples here on his intake, and I removed one of his lines that we have capping his open vacuums, and I've got the gauge hooked up to that port, and I've got this port blocked off so we don't have any vacuum leaks. It's all hooked up. Now it's time to fire up the motor. Alright guys, she's still doing the same stuff. Alright, so she stumbles, almost like it wants to fall flat on its face, but now it at least wants to accelerate, but it's got some kind of misfires. Let's see what the vacuum gauge is trying to tell us. Well, to start it off, she sounds a lot better already. Our vacuum here, it's within the green zone. We'll see what happens when I give the throttle. Alright. Our vacuum test is showing us that the motor is running properly, but you could see, like right as I was starting to test, that we're having a slight few misfires. But other than the few misfires, vacuum test is showing us ignition timing is good, our vacuum is good, and so really the only thing left for us to check is to see what our fuel pressure is doing. Robbie's got a fuel gauge, on his fuel rail, so we're going to take a look and see what we're sitting at here. It's pretty beat up looking, but I already don't like what I'm seeing. You can't read the numbers here on the camera, but the fuel pressure here on our gauge is showing at about 18 psi. So with how old his fuel gauge is that's on his rail, I'm not sure if this thing is reading accurately, so I'm going to pull out my personal test gauge, throw it on his fuel rail after we shut off this motor and depressurize the fuel system, and we'll fire it back up and see what my fuel gauge says. Motor's running, and my gauge here is showing us the same thing as his was. We're sitting between 15 and 18 psi. And we want to be seeing that fuel pressure up between 38 to 42 psi. I think we figured out what's wrong with this thing, and we have low fuel pressure. So now it's just to figure out whether or not it's the O'Reilly pump that we put in last summer causing pressure issues, or if we have a faulty fuel pressure regulator. Alright, we're going to start by disconnecting our vacuum line from the fuel pressure regulator to the intake manifold, and we're going to hook up our vacuum gauge to that same port. And after this, we're going to fire up the engine, and we're going to check for two things. First thing we're going to check is to make sure that we've got vacuum reaching the fuel pressure regulator, and then at the same time, with the vacuum line disconnected from the fuel pressure regulator, it should jump fuel pressure up to where it is supposed to be regulating fuel at. Alright, well, we have vacuum, so we know vacuum is making its way to our fuel pressure regulator. And what's our gauge telling us here? Our gauge is still sitting here between 15 and 18 psi. So now we need to 100% make sure that our issue is the fuel pressure regulator and not the pump. So if you've made it this far, you're going to need to move on to this next step here. Alright, so it's time for us to figure out whether or not our low fuel pressure issue is being caused by the fuel pressure regulator or from a faulty fuel pump. The way we're going to do that is we're going to pull out a pair of pliers. We're going to end up pinching shut the fuel return line while the engine's running. If our fuel pump is good, we should see a spike in fuel pressure at our fuel pressure gauge. If we don't see a spike at our fuel pressure gauge, then that means that we've got weak pressure coming from our fuel pump. Got our pliers. We're going to watch our gauge, and we're going to pinch his fuel return line shut. And we see absolutely no increase in pressure. We'll release it. We'll do it one more time just to double check. I'm pinching it shut, and we've got absolutely no change. Well, everyone, the result of all the testing that we have done here has once again led us to the conclusion that we have a faulty fuel pump in the fuel tank here on Robbie's cb7 again. So we're going to end up having to drop the fuel tank out of his car. We're going to need to get our hands on another high performance fuel pump to throw into this tank to get rid of the O'Reilly pump and pretty much never have this problem again. The sun is starting to set, and I'm running out of things to cover here on the car with you guys, so we're going to go ahead and end the video here. Thank you guys for being a part of the team here at Woodstocks. If you're not a part of the team already, join us here. Hit the subscribe button below. Click the like buttons on all these videos. Share them away. Comment down below. And until next time, peace out.